I know you did go through them again, some of them. Just reaction to Twitter, if we can. The president this morning appeared to be threatening regulation or something. What's the president prepared to do as it relates to Twitter specifically? And why isn't Twitter allowed to do what it wants as a private company?
Well, Twitter cannot suppress voices, and others can't suppress votes. That's part of our democracy. I think the president is saying that conservatives for a very long time have felt social media could give them the voice that they don't have in mainstream media. We know the statistics that close to 9 in 10, or maybe this year more than 9 in 10 mainstream media individuals say that they vote for the Democrat for president. So many people look at social media as the democratization of information for them, their ability to participate in democracy as they eventually do at the ballot box. So the president is saying, please stop suppressing conservative voices and folks who feel like they don't necessarily are treated fairly there, and they need to do that. I thought using outlets that are decisively and proudly anti-Trump to fact-check the president was maybe the richest piece of the whole thing. So that's called circular. And I just think I made a little superstar out of Yoel Roth, Yoelroth, at Yoyoel. Apparently he's in charge of integrity at Twitter. Nobody even knows who this guy is, but you should read some of his tweets where he's attacking the president, he's attacking Trump voters, pretty significantly attacking the leader of the Senate, majority leader of the Senate. And we don't need clowns like that pontificating and opinionating and then turning around and saying they're in charge of integrity at Twitter. That's very concerning to people. So he'll probably get a few more Twitter followers that he wasn't banking on, and maybe he'll think thrice before he uses that platform in his official capacity to essentially call many Americans deplorable and irredeemable. Joe?
What can the president do to Twitter, and what can the president do to the states that are expanding ballot voting by mail without running afoul of the Constitution?
Well, we're very concerned about the constitutional right to exercise your franchise and vote. One vote, one person. And I know that you got a lot of people saying, we're looking at the data and the science, Unless it's 86 and sunny, then they're all out on the boardwalk and the beach. And the governors just sort of say, oh, wow. So I think people need to be honest and consistent here. But whether it is Nancy Pelosi trying to have proxy voting become institutionalized in the House so that the folks who should be here working won't even come back to work. They'll be home. And it's not like they're with their constituents, Joe. Their constituents are locked down. They made it that way. So that's very concerning. Mail-in balloting as the main way to vote would be very concerning because you see the polls, you see the economic indicators. People want this country to open up. You now have 50 governors have reopening plans. You now see the consumer confidence. The stock market yesterday was because of the confidence in the market that states are reopening, that people are going back to their places of worship, their places of work, their places of learning, their places of recreation. So why would we go the opposite way 5.5 months from now? Over 5 months from now, we're so sure that people are going to need to cast their ballot by mail. The president made two things very clear in the Rose Garden yesterday. I'll repeat on his behalf. Number one, of course you'll get an absentee ballot if you need one. If you're infirm, if you're sick, if you're out of state, like he'll be, and he can't go vote in person in Florida. If there is some reason for you to an absentee ballot, you can proffer that by mail, as many people do. Our military vote that way, for example, many of them. But that's different from institutionalizing mail-in balloting and pretending that somehow that is the only safe way that people can exercise their franchise. Look, there's a concern. Real Clear Politics posted an article that about 112% of LA County were registered to vote, were seen as registered to vote. You know those statistics don't add up. I'm sure your fact checkers will be all over that today. I can't wait to see. And so that's very concerning.
But Kelly, there are five states in the country, including Utah, perhaps one of the reddest states in the country, that vote entirely vote by mail. So if it works there, why shouldn't it work in other places?
Well, it works there for many reasons. I know Oregon, I think, was maybe the first state to do that many years ago. It also, I think mail-in balloting often favors incumbents because other people, maybe not at the presidential level.
Republican or Democrat, doesn't favor one party, right?
Well, that's not necessarily true. It depends who's in charge.
Democrats in Utah?
It depends who's in charge. But again, why are we presuming 5 months beforehand that people predominantly or exclusively are only going to want and be able to vote by mail. People are very proud to show up and go to the polls. They really are. I mean, they wait in line at Georgetown Cupcake for an hour to get a cupcake. So I think they can probably wait in line to do something as consequential and critical and constitutionally significant as cast their ballot. And the other thing that concerns me is very simple. The Democrats don't like their candidate. They didn't want Joe Biden to be their nominee, so they're looking for any which way they can to find other methods by which to make him more appealing to the voters, I suppose. So why would I trust folks who have 112% of a county listed as registered to vote? Does that not bother you? That 112% of a county is registered to vote, meaning the numbers don't add up? I mean, that should be right there. People should say, you know what, perhaps we're not ready for this. Because next it's online voting. And pretty soon we're just going to have DoorDash and Uber Eats, deliver everything we need, including our ballots. It's just silly.
Speaking of Joe Biden, what's your reaction to the remark from Joe Biden that the president is, quote, an absolute fool for mocking the wearing of masks?
Well, that's what Joe Biden and the Democrats do, and you don't mind repeating it. They like to engage in name calling when they have nothing substantive to say. See, if I were Joe Biden, well, you asked me why he said that, so let's stick with him for a moment, to your own CNN's Dana Bash. If I were Joe Biden, I would have been bragging about my 40-year record in the Senate and my 32 years in the Senate and 8 years here in the White House, but he can't. What in God's name would he brag about? What would he say? So he has to engage in name calling. He can't say, look at all the things that I did as vice president. It's not even clear to anyone. In fact, it's pretty unclear to everyone that the president he served didn't even want him to run. He didn't endorse him until over a year of him announcing his candidacy. I think Joe Biden deserved better from Barack Obama. Very much. But he was quoted in the New York Times as saying, you don't need to do this, Joe. Joe did it anyway. And then he's quoted in the New York Times as saying to the Biden campaign team, make sure he doesn't embarrass himself. That's a little late. Fact check. That's a little late. But he had this great opportunity to tell CNN yesterday, and a very sympathetic audience at CNN, this is all I did as vice president, so I'm going to do it as president. But he can't. He's not the guy in the Rose Garden reducing the cost of insulin to $35 maximum copay each month for seniors. Donald Trump was yesterday. Mike Pence was yesterday. He's not the guy saying, I'm going to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. They sent more troops. They got us more involved in Afghanistan. They ran on, we're going to get out of Afghanistan. They got us more deeply involved in the Middle East in wars with no end. He can't stand there and say, I'm the guy who recalibrated and rebalanced a reciprocal trade deal with China. No, he didn't. He's the guy who presided over $500 million trade deficit each year with China. As the fentanyl poured into our countries, as the Uyghurs were dehumanized and worse, he let all that happen as he was vice president. So I'm not surprised that he has resorted to name calling only, because what is he going to say?
Well, I just wanted to go back.
I know you're not excluding the women reporters on purpose. I know you would never do that. No, it's okay. You're in the front. You're in the front row and everything. Go.
I did want to go back to Twitter one moment, and the president's implied threats against Twitter. It sounds like that could run afoul of the First Amendment and the rights of free speech. What do you say to that?
Well, I'll say what the president would say. We'll see what happens. He's probably their most famous user, their most prolific user. And you guys seem to live on Twitter.
Is he considering getting off of Twitter because of this?
He didn't say that, but he certainly has alternative platforms. He's the president of the United States.
Why not get off Twitter?
What would you guys do without Twitter? You'd have to go back to gumshoe reporting.
What would he do without Twitter?
No, what would you do without? Well, first of all, it's social media for him, not Twitter. He's all over social media, and it's his way to communicate with the world when he feels like he can't get another fair platform. And it's also what I say, the democratization of information. You know, the billionaire CEO who has 20 people monitoring social media for him, the stay-at-home mom, the plumber on the job who happens to look at his phone or have the president's tweets on alert, they all get a presidential communication at the same time for free. That is magical to me. I think that's unbelievably magical in 2020. In the 21st century, for people to hear from the president. They don't have to pay $50,000 to go to a fundraiser. They don't have to get invited to the White House, they can just hear from the president all at the same time. I think cutting out the middleman has upset the middleman a little bit because the president communicates directly to the American people. But come on, you're complicit too. You're besotted with Twitter. You just can't get enough of it when it suits you don't even fact check the tweets. You just run with them. You retweet them. You do entire segments on the Today Show about people's tweets. Who said that's giving people what they want?
We fact check the president's tweets.
You really don't, though. You think you do. But we fact check yours.
So
we swallowed to the point of vomiting it back out 2.5 years of delusion from your network and from your tweets and from people and from your guests like Adam Schiff. Should he be taken off of Twitter? Should we put a big red X over his mouth? Because he told CNN he had evidence of collusion was in plain sight. The president's going to jail. I'm sure we want to move on from the 2.5 years. I have a feeling.
I'm glad to. We've had this conversation before. If you want to continue, please.
No, I'm going to continue right here in the White House because it was all a load of crap, and you know it. And you should apologize at some point.
If I can ask you then about masks. Are wearing masks a political statement?
I'm sure for some people they are, but also the CDC has made very clear that particularly for people who aren't tested regularly or maybe asymptomatic spreaders, they should wear masks if they can. They should also socially distance.
Should they be?
I'm not telling Americans what to do. I tell Americans that they should look at the CDC guidelines, but you should also look at all the CDC guidelines. You should look at the ones that talk about reopening the country. You should look at the ones that say places of worship. Well, let's focus on all the CDC guidelines. I like the ones about places of worship, not being able to be discriminated against under the First Amendment because they're a protected activity, so they get a special solicitude.
And respectfully, we played that last Friday when the president said it and covered it again.
Well, CNN actually had a pre-done segment that ended up being false. The CDC guidelines that your colleague talked about didn't make it into the final guidelines.
Well, they were revised.
It's always fun to catch a leaker.
And we reported that they were revised.
The president said a reporter who was wearing a mask.
Fact check.
The president said a reporter wearing a mask in a crowd of other reporters was being politically correct.
I didn't see that comment, but I did think it was very funny that on your cable station yesterday, the mask-wearing anchor was shaming people walking by in Wisconsin for not wearing a mask, and the Packers fan who wasn't wearing a mask that your network tried to make an example of, pointing him out, took his camera out and said, your camera crew's not, well, our cameraman right now is not wearing a mask. Your crew's not wearing a mask, pointing out the hypocrisy.
Let me ask you if I can know about the president. Is it politically correct to wear a mask, as the CDC recommends, in a crowd of other people?
I'm not really into what's politically correct and what's not, obviously, so I'm not really. If you want me to point out the hypocrisy of the politically correct crowd,
I guess I'm just saying
we could talk about.
Why not say to the audience,
we could talk about.
If you're in a crowd, wear a mask.
We did say that. The CDC is part of our government.
So why wouldn't
We've worked every single day here for months to get the CDC guidelines right, to get the coronavirus task force up and running and humming and making available all the doctors and scientists to you round the clock.
Can we ask about NASA today? Is there any chance, obviously the weather there is a little funny right now, is there any discussion about changing plans? Is the president going regardless?
The president is scheduled to leave here about 12:20, and he's very excited. He has family members going, staffers. We're really excited. This is a private example, Elon Musk example of ingenuity and space exploration, scientific progress, perhaps human exploration. I think it also helps us brings us into better footing in our war-fighting capacity ultimately. And so you've got the private Elon Musk SpaceX undertaking, and then also very recent you had the president and vice president announce Space Force, the first armed services branch in I think 72 years since the Air Force was founded. So it's all very exciting. And I'm not surprised that this president, who's been so bold in energy dominance and deregulation and insulin price reduction and recalibrating trade deals with Korea and Canada and Mexico and Japan and China, that he took one more bold step for mankind, quote unquote. We were very happy to have Buzz Aldrin part of this, part of what we were doing with Space Force, and honored at during the 50th anniversary of first man on the moon, last State of the Union in 2019. Very exciting for us to be in touch with folks like that as well.
Cuomo visit, can you just sort of talk to us a little bit about what that's supposed to be? And now does it appear that the governor of one of the nation's largest states is getting on board the president's push for more infrastructure?
Well, since you work at CNN, we're going to clarify that the Cuomo that's visiting is the governor, Andrew Cuomo. Yes, we're happy he's coming. I think it's the third time they've met this year. And they have talked, obviously, about the coronavirus response, reopening New York, a state and a city the president knows well and loves deeply. And also, they've talked about infrastructure and other projects as well. But sure, it does show that Governor Cuomo, like the other governors, now has a reopening plan. I saw just today that businesses in Long Island are going to start reopening. And that's good, because that's what the people want and that's what they deserve. It's May 27th today, or about May 27th. People are staring at their June 1st bills with trepidation, with great fear, as they did for the May 1st bills and their April 1st bills. And we want to make sure that these small businesses that were thriving in the historic Trump economy can thrive again. If you look at the market is up yesterday. The futures were up this morning, Joe. I saw Carnival Cruise Line stock up 11%, United Airlines up 8%. Even the hard-hit travel industry stocks seem to be blossoming a bit on the promise that things are starting to return to a little bit of normalcy. It'll take a while, but this is exciting. You have Obama-era economists like Jason Furman saying he thinks it's going to be a very quick recovery. I'm sure he's not going to be invited to the right cocktail parties anymore, but we appreciate his very clear-headed and honest, objective analysis about a recovery that we hope lifts all boats.
Governor Cuomo said he wants to talk about those infrastructure projects. He said a new Penn Station, a train to LaGuardia, train tunnels under the Hudson, Second Avenue subway. Is that something this administration is interested in working with them on?
Well, we're always listening. Again, it's funny that Joe Biden couldn't discuss that in his interview with CNN yesterday, that his accomplishments, I think that it was Joe Biden that referred to LaGuardia as a third world airport. Am I right? I think he did that a few years ago. I just can't forget things and people I'd like to, so I'm definitely not going to forget things like that. And so he insulted LaGuardia Airport. Maybe we'll be the ones to help get it up and running, make it world class, although they've been renovating nicely. Everything that Governor Cuomo would come here to speak about apparently didn't get done in the last administration for 8 years, and he's running against the vice president of that administration. So we're always open to do that, but I will tell you the president's first priorities with Governor Cuomo and all the governors is exactly what was discussed in yesterday's governor's call, probably the 18th or so of its kind, with Vice President Pence yesterday, and that is the continuing response to these dual medical and financial crises that our country is facing. I was speaking yesterday in the Oval Office with the president and with the vice president about that governor's call late afternoon, and the vice president relayed a number of factors and items that were discussed, Betsy, and it sounded like, again, another productive call with the governor saying, thank you for your support of this, thanks for surging supplies like ventilators, thanks for the therapeutics and vaccine development, thanks for the money, thanks to the National Guard coming to clean the nursing homes. And speaking of nursing homes, I certainly hope that's on the agenda today, because that obviously was a huge screw up in New York, sending infected patients, infecting nursing home residents back to those nursing homes in close quarters with other members of the vulnerable population. But this president continues to deliver for seniors. We made great strides for nursing home populations, for veterans, and yesterday in the Rose Garden, huge announcement we've been working on for 9 months at least with Administrator Verma and others in this White House, to reduce the cost of insulin to a maximum $35 a month copay for Medicare Part D beneficiaries. That's on the heels of the 2018 announcement that we would allow under Medicare Part D what was excluded in Medicare Part B, getting your insulin mechanically or electronically. So some get it through the pump, some get it through the pen. Really just expanding the ability. Too many seniors are saying at the $50 price pressure point, they were taking a smaller dose of insulin, no insulin, not getting the prescription filled. So hopefully this will be great relief. Again, we were waiting for Congress. If you go back, the president tweeted, I'm sure you saw it, fact check, he tweeted about 1.5 years ago that he hung up the phone with Nancy Pelosi and they're going to work together on, I think it was infrastructure and drug pricing. It never happened. She came here and threw a hissy fit and 2 different infrastructure meetings and left. I know you covered whatever her coat was that day and sunglasses, but I was there for the substance. It wasn't impressive. We don't have infrastructure with them. Then they were going to do drug pricing. Where are they already? They're acting up and not acting at all. So their failure to act on drug pricing meant that the president took it upon himself to do a deal with the 3 big insulin makers, also here in the Rose Garden yesterday, the healthcare plan providers, Humana, United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Express Scripts, Cigna, and the rest in the Rose Garden yesterday. The patient advocate for American Diabetes Association, Tracy Browns, who herself is a diabetic insulin user, just remarkable to have them all there make this deal with the White House on behalf of American seniors.
What was the rationale behind moving up the travel restrictions for Brazil?
Well, what we see in the data, I mean, I don't know if they were trying to do herd immunity or it's just, quote, the flu or what was going on, but it's not getting, it doesn't look like it was improving much there in Brazil. So the same action the president took with China, Europe, and then the UK and Ireland, he expanded, into, and will continue to do that if he needs to. Not that I know of.
Was the president's announcement on insulin sort of a tacit acknowledgement that he's taking a hit in the polls with the seniors?
No, it's a scream out loud expression that Joe Biden, that the senior citizens in the Democratic Party, like Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden, have done absolutely nothing for seniors when it comes to insulin and the cost of prescription drugs. Have done nothing for seniors when it comes to the VA Choice Act that this president put forth on behalf of veterans, young, old, and in between. But he said as a candidate, Mr. Trump said as a candidate, I will not touch Social Security and Medicare. And he has not touched Social Security and Medicare unless it was for good purposes. Medicare Part D premiums have decreased 3 years in a row. That's causation, not coincidence. We've had a president who's worked really hard to make that happen. And now with the insulin, we also had a seniors event in the East Room a couple of weeks ago where the president had Secretary Azar, Administrator Verma, Administrator Gaynor from FEMA, the guy from the National Guard, Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee, all talk about different pieces of the seniors' agenda in the nursing home action that they've been taking. So, no, this president has been working for seniors every single day for 3 years, so there's nothing tacit about a stated out loud, loudly and proudly in the Rose Garden open press event to make sure American seniors, and thank you for any help that you plan on lending to let American seniors know that they now have a government that has a wonderful and a public-private sector announcement plan that really works for them so that they don't have to choose between other corporal needs and their insulin.
Kellyanne, just days ago, Timothy Klasudis, who is the widower of the woman who worked for Joe Scarborough in 2001, she passed away after it was ruled a heart arrhythmia. She hit her head and died. The widower basically asked Twitter to drop the president's tweets, has said that his wife deserves better, and basically wants this to stop, these conspiracy theories, as he describes them, including those he says by the president. Should the president stop amplifying it and follow this widower's wishes?
Well, I will tell you that you mentioned Twitter. The president has spoken about this. Twitter has spoken about this so far. I would just say I'm very sorry for that family's loss, and I'm very sorry for the loss of life of a 28-year-old young woman who was in the prime of her life. So I'm very sorry about that, and I think all life is precious. Unborn, born, whether they die at 28 from a different reason, whether they die from COVID, whether they die from suicide, drug overdose, abuse because they're in lockdowns, whatever, every life for me is precious. And speaking of precious lives and the unborn, you really should take a look at the new videotapes that released of sworn testimony, the people, those awful women at Planned Parenthood having to swear under oath that they in fact were selling baby body parts and human fetal tissue. Disgrace on your taxpayer dollars, by the way. They get $500,000 a year in taxpayer money. They give 99% of their political money to Democrats, maybe higher now, and they should be held to account. Nation's largest abortion provider, as they got under oath, having to admit something that they wouldn't admit otherwise, that they would. No, you're not.
I said I'm glad to. Can I ask you that about? So is it appropriate, Kellyanne, for the president? Okay, that was the tough spot.
All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us here at Golden State Times. If you liked our coverage of Kellyanne Conway's Q&A with reporters, then make sure you guys click the thumbs up button and share it on social media. Let us know which part was your favorite in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Gold State Times and visit our website, goldenstatetimes.com. If you want to get notified for future live streams of President Trump, Congress, the Pentagon, State Department, and everything else in between, then all you have to do to get notified 100% of the time instead of 10% of the time with YouTube, all you have to do is send us a text message with the word Trump Live to the number 555-888. And we will add you to that list so you can get notified 100% of the time when we go live. Thank you so much for watching, folks, and I'll see you soon. Peace.